So you also had a really heavy involvement in the McNeil Island education program. Was this something you struck out on your own, or was this part of TCC?
I grew up beside a state prison. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, and the warden was Roland May. I came to Tacoma to teach. I got an invitation from Roland May to come over and say hi. I had started interviewing at prisoners at Boise, even way back in the early years of college, famous murderers, that kind of thing. And so I went with Bob Thaden, Bud Schaefer, I think Bob Lathrop. We went over to meet the prisoners. It was called Self-Improvement Group, SIG, and Roland May, who I admired every bit as much as John Terry, who was a reform warden who believed that education could change inmates. And he was wanting this kind of attitude, and he knew my background anyway, knew my mother. So we went over. The first thing the prisoners asked is, could you help us to get classes here? TV classes, if it had to be. And so, and the next day, John and I went to a martini party for Warren Magnuson, senator. Warren Magnuson, hail fellow, well met. He drank, he couldn't speak, he mumbled. He did everything that you wouldn't believe a U.S. senator. And John asked him, do you know where any money is that we could start a program at McNeil Island? And Senator Magnuson, he had his assistant was Featherstone Reed, famous for being called Feather. He turned to Feather, he says, go find him some money. And Feather said, okay. And Monday, he called back, and he said, we got $9,000 for you. And so we started a course in general psychology, 100, for the inmates. It went over incredibly well. We rode over on the boat 4 or 5 times. I went to talk with them about other courses. We were hopeful that this grant would go on. It was an FCC grant to experiment on television courses. It was right at the beginning of the television era. And we sent Bob Lathrop as the teacher to go over. This is with high security, all kinds of crap. Anyway, about this time I met Roland Vincent on one of the ferry boats, and I told him we were really up against it. He was the treasurer of the warehouse company. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And so the next time I went over with him, he called and said, let's go together. He said, well, we're going to go with $60,000 and a library supplement to bring in library books that they can use. And so, and for 11 years, the Weyerhaeuser people paid the tuition. There were some inmates who could pay it, but in the main, it was a quiet, silent program. The head of the Weyerhaeuser Foundation was a woman, and she said, you're stealing my money. And I said, I'm not stealing your money. I said, if Mr. Vincent said he wanted that the Weyerhaeusers wanted to do this. I said, you go talk to them, not me.
Yeah. So what year did the McNeil program start?
66.
So really right after the college was...
Yeah, we were just in our birth pangs. And what business did we have doing that? Well, we were even worse. We were doing... I talked with a man named Greenhall at Fort Lewis, and he wanted a program in criminal justice. And so we started that, and president of at that time Fort Steilacoom, now Pierce, he called me and he said, "What are you doing in my territory?" I said, "Federal land is open land. Anybody that can put a program that they want can do that." He said, "I'm going to talk to the head of the community college system, and we're going to get you guys straightened out." You know, geez, he was mad. and so for, I guess, 8 or 10 years, we had Fort Lewis and McCord, and we were going along great.
And how long did the McNeil program last? Is that still going?
No, till it went over to the state. When it went over to the state, it automatically went to Pierce College. Okay. But it was no longer a college
years was
program.
That?
What?
How many years was that we had it?
11.
11, okay. And how is it different to educate inmates from the population that was over here at TCC?
Oh, that's an interesting story. There was a race between the inmates and the guards on courses. A dead boy, no quarter ask. If they get that course, we get that course. It didn't matter which side you're talking to. And they were all in psychology, mostly trying to outsmart each other. It was a great, wonderful program. I taught history there all 11 years. I volunteered to do that. I didn't want a salary or anything. I wanted the program to succeed. There were a whole bunch of us that did that. Just whatever way we could. We put the money in the tuition thing. That was another very important part of the birth of the college and the library. We each took 5 extra students to get the library equipped and everything. That we did that for 3 years to get it started. The library. It was a real commitment.
The library at McNeil or at Tacoma Community College?
Both. Okay. Here at Tacoma Community College in the Maine. Mm-hmm. On campus, we voted as a faculty to do that.
And at McNeil, did the students attain a degree, or were they just taking classes?
Oh yeah, we had some great and let's see, they were bank robbers, they were income tax evaders. These guys were great students, and you never could catch them cheating. And they did a fine job at that. Magnificent. Never, every time you caught up with them they were in another step. And so it was and I might say that I got a job at the University of Buffalo and went to Attica to try to help, after the riot, to try to help them with an education program, and it got nowhere. Roland May and then Jake Parker, the next warden at McNeil, both were moderates. There were those wardens I've met who make them pay. I remember one of them saying, "Hang them up there on the cross. Don't trust them. Don't try to do anything with them. Just get them away. Put them away. They're not going to change." It was.
But you actually volunteered for many years to work with them, so you must not have felt that way.
Yeah, if you're a teacher and you don't believe you can change students, what are you doing? What business are you in? And geez, I taught on the McCord flight line in the ready room. I taught in barracks at Fort Lewis. I did to try to start programs. That was going clear back to the pull together with John. We were always trying, the idea was not to just hold 30 students in a classroom and self-contained. The idea was to go out. But at community college, concept was community. You go out in the community. I taught in the Hilltop for years, trying. I taught at Purdy, hardest place in the world to teach, right? Almost beating your head against the wall. But all of that was basically the concept of the community college, trying to help people have higher expectations and reach for it. I'm a product of that.